As a little bit of background, let me hop into the first amendment that's on the ballot, is Amendment 1, and it deals with public financing in Florida of campaigns. And the logic behind that is that it costs a lot of money to run for a statewide office in Florida. We have 9 major media markets. It's an effort that's going to cost millions of dollars, and the logic is that should personal wealth or access to massive amounts of private financing be a precondition for running for state office. There are those that think that we should allow or try to put something in place where we don't allow other potentially viable candidates that might not do as well on the financing front through private or personal wealth, but to have, again, a little bit of help from the legislature. We've had a public financing program in the state of Florida since 1986. The legislature put it in place at that time. Moving along, it was there and it got modified. But the Constitutional Revision Commission, when it met in 1998, said that they thought that it was so important to have a public financing program, they wanted to protect it by putting it into the Constitution. So they proposed an amendment that ended up passing, which mandates the legislature to have a program. Now, the details of the program, and there's some important details that concern who would be eligible for public financing, what would the formula be in terms of the matching requirements, what kind of caps would you put in place, and if you went above a particular cap, you would no longer be eligible for public financing, and then the overall cost of the program itself. All of those elements are actually under the legislature's discretion. In the Constitution, it simply says you have to have a program. Now, the cost of the program has escalated. In 2005, there was an important change. The legislature lifted the caps from what was about $5 million if you're running for governor, and about half that if you're running for one of the other cabinet positions. They lifted that and they put in place a formula, $2 if you're running for governor for every voter in the state of Florida, $1 for the cabinet. And so these caps have now escalated up to, for the governor's race this year, the cap is just a shade under $25 million, and about half that for the cabinet races. So that change was put in place in 2005. In 2009, the legislature attempted to pass some legislation that said if we actually were ever to amend the Constitution to take this requirement out, then it would automatically kill the program. That didn't happen, and now we have an amendment on the ballot this year. And so I think what the amendment would do, in and of itself, it will not end public financing. It's still in the discretion of the legislature. What it would do is just kick it back to the legislature, and they would not be mandated to have it anymore. But given what we saw in 2009, it would seem pretty clear that the legislature would try to then kill or eliminate the program probably in the next session. So that's a little bit of background on that issue. On the arguments, again, there is sort of as a matter of principle, there's the argument that public money, tax dollars, should not be used to finance politicians' campaigns. So as a matter of principle, there's resistance. Let's get rid of this program. There's the issue of cost. It has the total for the state of Florida since this program was put in place, $27 million. The last session, or the last round in 2006, we had races for the governor and the cabinet. The bill was $11 million for the state of Florida. So there's issues of cost and other elements in terms of the cap being very high. But I would point out that that stuff is under the discretion of the legislature. That's not in the Constitution. So if it's the modalities of the public financing program that are at issue, be aware that the legislature can change how it's done without eliminating the mandate. And on the other side, you can eliminate the mandate and still have it, but that probably wouldn't happen. Moving on to Amendment 2. Amendment 2 deals with a homestead tax exemption for deployed military personnel. The ones if you're deployed overseas. This has been the amendment that's received the least amount of attention around the state. The logic simply is our American men and women serving in our armed forces have just given so much, and is there anything that we can do for them to give back a little? State of Florida, there's an effort in the legislature, this is a legislative initiative put on the ballot, an amendment to the Constitution that would be a formula based on the percentage of the days of the year. So if you were 365 days, it's 100%. If you were half the year, it would be 50%. A formula which would reduce your ad valorem taxes to pay as a property taxes. There is a little additional background. About estimated 25,000 military personnel living in the state of Florida that will be eligible for the program. They've run some numbers, and if the program had been in place last year, 2009, the bill would have been about $13 million. There is no organized resistance to this particular amendment. One of the things that I think struck me when I first saw it was, why do we have to go into the Constitution? Why is this not just something done in the legislature, given the fact that there's really little resistance in the legislature doing this? And the answer to that question is actually the relevant body of property tax law is in the Constitution, as I mentioned before. Some other places it wouldn't be, it'd be in legislature, but in order to do this, the legislature just can't do it. They have to go back into the Constitution to make the fix. Despite the fact that there is no organized resistance, there's been a few editorials and some papers that have come down against the amendment. The two arguments that you see put out there most often is one of simply the fiscal restraint or the fiscal argument. I noted before the public financing program where that gets a lot of attention in terms of it's not a whole lot of money, but $11 million, and so be aware that the tax amendment would be more expensive than the last round of the public financing program. The other issue that St. Pete Times ran an editorial, which pointed out that there are probably lots of men and women in the armed forces that live in apartments that really could use like a $1,000 tax break. This amendment wouldn't do anything for them in particular. Aside from those two, there hasn't been, again, too many other arguments that have been put out there against the amendment.